Welcome to another live performance walkthrough. You guys seem to enjoy the last one, so I thought we'd try it again. This is for the track that I recently uploaded called Running Out. There'll be a link below in the description. In case you missed the last video, quick high-level overview. I always have three goals when trying to do things like this. The first is to make as complete of songs as possible. The second is to be as analog as I can, meaning no computers, no samples. I did allow myself one sample in this, which you'll hear in a little bit. And then third, I have to try to be able to perform it live in as much as possible. So this song has about probably 3 or 5 different ideas in it, and I didn't really want to keep everything patched up to try to do a bunch of songs because I'm actually going to make some changes to the rack, which I'm pretty excited about. So I decided to just smash them all into one track and see if I could make something that made any sense to come out of it, which is what I'm going to go over today. Overview of the system. This is the main rack. There are 16 channels running from here to the Allen & Heath SQ5 mixer. And in this song, I definitely use it as a performance mixer, whether it's meant to be used as that way or not. There are 8 channels coming out of the analog rhythm, which is doing all of the drums. So 16 from here, 8 from here, all going into the desktop mixer. Then there are 8 send and receive effects outputs that are going in and out of this rack here that are doing all the effects. All that is getting put into 2 main mixes, A and B. Those are going into the Octatrack, so I can flip between them, live sample them. This enables all the transitions and a lot of the tricks to make the live performance work. That output is going back into the desktop mixer, which is ultimately going out a single stereo track, which is being recorded, which is ultimately the sound that you hear. Lots to go over. This track has a tremendous amount of voices and sequences and switches and all that type of stuff. So I think we're going to start by just going through all of the voices and then beginning to walk through the performance sort of step by step and how I actually did it. All right, let's start with an overview of the effects that we're using. We've got the Herbiverb, which is probably for one of the very first times, not just the main reverb that everything sort of participates to, but more of a specialty reverb only used on a handful of the voices, and set to sound kind of tinny. So the tilt is up a little higher. I used to have I had the size lower, but anyway, I ended up with these settings here. And then the main reverb, actually, for probably the first time, is the Starlab, being just the general go-to reverb for most of the voices. And I don't know, sounds pretty good. You'll have to let me know what you think. Not using the Magneto this time, just forcing myself not to use it. On the delay side, using the Modcan dual delay, which I recently finally was able to find. And also using the Bizarre Jezebel Mimosa to add some just slight saturation to some of the channels. Again, one of my favorite effects. And because I hadn't used it for a while, this is going to be used. We're actually going to be using the Morphogene and the Fumana as well. And FX Aid is also applying a little bit of the Lo-Fi Junkie emulation. In fact, I think the Lo-Fi Junkie emulation in here is so good that I actually got rid of my actual Lo-Fi Junkie, which used to be right here. Now it's actually going to be replaced with a Chloe from Bizarre Jezebel, which is on its way. Okay, so that's the effects. Again, those are 8 channels of send and receive coming out of the desktop mixer being applied to the different voices in various ways. Let's run through the percussion, the drum sounds. So there are essentially, let's get this started. Let's mute some of this up. All right, there we go. There are essentially 2 drum kits, mainly just featuring 2 different kick drums and a little bit of a different snare, but I think the hi-hats are pretty much the same. So the first one, I don't think I ever used the open hi-hat. I think I was supposed to, but I think I forgot. So put them all together. Then the second drum kit is a much more in-your-face kick drum. I actually really like how that kick drum turned out. And I actually put a sub bass kick with it too, but you'll probably only be able to hear on headphones or really good speakers. Not sure if that made it too boomy or not. It sounded pretty good on the headphones that I usually use to just check sound. But putting these all together. All right, so that is the drums. Another quick overview of what we're doing with the Octatrack that's a little different than I've done in the past. I wanted to actually try this technique out, where I have set up a handful of different MIDI tracks that are sending commands to the mixer to do some bulk muting and changing of levels. There's just this song has so many things going on that there's many times that I just didn't quite have enough hands. There's also part of one of the MIDI commands is actually switching that drum kit to get to that new drum. So for example, if I just mess all that up and I hit this last key here, that will send a MIDI command to reset everything to sort of the first step of the song. And then I have one other change, which is the button right next to it, which gets us set up for kind of a spot somewhere halfway in the middle. Also have 3 other MIDI commands right here that just do some muting. Let's see if we can see this working. So I saw some of the mutes turn on, see some of them turn off, like that. So that's just doing, again, freeing up some hands that I just couldn't quite operate everything all at the same time. So that's new. I'm trying that out. It actually worked pretty good. It's a little cumbersome to get set up. It's probably not on the video, but I'm using a Bohm box. At least I believe I'm saying that correctly, which is basically a MIDI translator. You can take commands coming in and then with a little utility program define what commands you want to go out and then store that little program on the box so it doesn't have to be hooked up to a computer. Works pretty slick. I think I'm probably going to kind of keep iterating on this idea, but it was definitely useful for this track. Okay, so that's the rhythm, that's the Octatracks, that's the effects. Let's just start going through the voices one at a time. All right, so the 2 things that you hear right away at the beginning of the track is a let's turn this one off so we can just hear it. Is a turn that off too. Is just a noise source. This I use just for various sort of background swoops and swooshes in between transitions and things like that. It is noise coming out of the Entropic Doom and adding a handful of different modulation to it that is then ultimately going through the Akari filter. And I have two controls that I can basically affect the noise with using these acid rain navigators, which I love. I think I'm going to get like 6 more of these. Then I would just make things more complicated. So probably should just keep it to 4. So the first thing I can do is I can open up the filter, open and closed. The second thing I can do is with this fader down, the sound has a kind of a staccato pattern to it. If I raise this one up, it just goes to a solid kind of open VCA noise, which lets me get a couple of different kinds of sounds. The other thing I can do is I can open up this top pot here, which is going to add just a flutter to the noise that's used in a lot of standard risers. Then this pot here is sort of just another gear to the pitch of the sound. I can make it go even higher. So that's the noise controls. All right, next sound that you hear in the track is, we'll do that one next, is this one. This really cool, pad sound. I call it I'll probably refer to it as like the elevator sound. How that's being made is through the Brenzo. It's kind of a cool idea. I actually want to explore it a little further, but it's the left side of the Brenzo is FM modulating the right side, and they're both tuned to about the exact same frequency so that it sounds pretty good. Their volt per octave on each oscillator is being independently set, I believe by the USTA. And what it's doing is it's just stepping through a series of notes, same notes to each oscillator. But what it's doing is the independent volt per octaves are going through 2 different very slow slew limiters. One is on the contour 1. In fact, I couldn't get the contour to go slow enough, so I have a bunch of negative voltage coming from the cold MAC, which is actually pulling it even slower than normal. And then the other one is coming out of stages. One of these slew limiters is convex, and the other is concave. So when the note jumps to another note, they slowly track up to that note, kind of following two different curves, which makes that FM separate as it gets to that new note and then come back together. Then it goes up to the next note and does that, next note and does that. And it just kind of steps through these notes up and down. Then that's all running into a filter, which I believe is ripples, which is having its cutoff modulated by the Phalistri, which is just doing a one LFO modulating the rate of another LFO. So this, speed up and slow down kind of modulation effect. And then I can open and close that ripples filter with this control here. And so this one just kind of keeps going through this elevator up and down, pretty much through the entire track. Sort of just acts as the background pad. But I can kind of bring it in and out when I find it interesting. Okay, so that is those. Then you'll hear this a very quiet pad sound in the back. This is actually one of the voices that will occur, which will show up later in the track, doing more of a lead sound. But one of the things I try to do is just introduce voices early, even if they're doing something totally different. Subconsciously get the listener ready to. They may not knowingly associate it, but when they hear that voice again later in the track, it helps to kind of glue everything together. So this is just doing like a constant tone in the background, kind of a noise floor sound. But a little bit later, let's see here. It is going to be doing this part. All right. And I had to change a part on the R101 to get that to work, as well as the sequential switch. So that's the elevator sound, that's the noise, that's this our pad sound that's in the background. The pad sound in the background is it's both gate and pitch, it's being modulated by the ER101. The elevator sound again is getting its pitch sequence through the USTA, and then the noise is just going into the filters being controlled by these attenuators. In general, the Symphonion is doing all of the quantization and doing some octave changes a little bit later. It's a huge module, but it does a good job at what it does. I always am moving it around, trying to find a good spot for it, but it's living right here for right now. All right, so let's move on to the next sound that you'll hear in the track, which is this bass line. And the bass line comes in actually with a high-pass filter. Both the bass line and the kick come in this intro high-pass filtered up, so that after the drop they come in at full force to make them sound a little bit bigger. A very common production trick of getting your bass and your kick to sound bigger when they finally come in. So this is a kind of a quasi psytrance bass. It is a sawtooth being generated by the ACL multifunction discrete VCO, which is getting a sync off of the 16th note gate, so make sure those sawtooths are lined up right on their edges. It is going through an ADSR envelope also from the ACL into the Belgrade down here. And then finally, it's actually running through the Grisselizer VCA, which is essentially just to add a little bit of overdrive to it. Make it sound a little bigger. I'm actually going to move that modulation down a little bit. And then, of course, that's going to be sidechained against the kick. Okay, so that's the next sound that gets introduced. Then the kick comes in, When we go through the performance, we'll show the kick coming in. I actually cheat a small amount on how I bring the kick in. I wanted to bring the kick in again with a high pass filter, and I just when the drop happens, I just did not have enough hands to be able to mute everything, kick in the audio the audio sample that I have, and then go into the drop. And so I actually sample the high pass kick very briefly, so I can bring that in. And keep my hands free so that when I can bring in the full, the unfiltered kick, I don't have to change its filter, and I'll show you that a little bit. It's a slight cheat with the sampling, but it's just sampling of the actual kick drum. Then I allowed myself a sample because I wanted to use the Morphogene, and I found on my computer a folder of samples from the Gauntlet 2 arcade game, I believe.
Valkyrie, your life force is running out.
So there's actually a bunch of cool. I made a reel out of all these samples.
Keys to open doors. I've not seen such bravery. Valkyrie needs food badly. Welcome. Valkyrie,
so anyway, I just ended up using the Valkyrie is your life force is running out sample. I have very strong memories of the samples from this game. So that is again coming out of the Morphogene. I have its play input is sort of being controlled in two ways. I can just flick the momentary switch here to just play one shot of the sample, and then I can also change the mode of this switch, and it'll just keep this input high and just give me the sample over and over and over again. So one of the things that I love about the Morphogene is I use it very, very simply, but you can take a sample like this, and you can find different rhythms in the sample, which I think can be really cool. So other neat thing I'm doing with the sample is it's running out of the Morphogene, so there's a dry version of it, which is what you've been hearing. Then I'm also taking a copy of it and running it through the Fumana. And it is coming into the Fumana as to be spectrally analyzed, and then to apply that spectrum to an input. So it's basically just it's a vocoder. And the input is the baseline. And so what it is trying to do so you can hear it's trying to apply that the sample to make its frequency spectrum, make the baseline achieve the same frequency spectrum, and you get this kind of cool vocoded version of it. Then what I can also do is I can find cool rhythms inside that vocoding. And I use those quite a bit in this song. One other small little effect that we do is this little really thin, swept kind of electrical sound. Just as a kind of a little background fill sound. It only occurs once. I meant to use it actually quite a bit more, and I just completely forgot about it. But that's being made by the Trident. It is going into some filters to just grab a very, very narrow frequency. It's doing some of its self-modulation to get that really thin sound. I really like that sound, and I just ended up not using it as much as I initially wanted to. Okay, so what do we have next? We have the sort of the first lead line that comes into the song, which is this here. So this is being voiced out of the Osiris, which I recently got. I'd say I'm pretty lukewarm on it, to be perfectly honest. I really wish it had attenuators on its modulation. Maybe I'd like it better once I start modulating it more. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. Watched too many videos and got a little too hyped about it. But anyway, it's creating this sound, which is nice, but it could be made 1,000 different ways and other things that I have. That is being, again, sequenced pitch and gate by the ER101. and going through the natural gate low pass gate by Rabbit Elephant, and then we've got another voice that overlays on top of this one. Oh, and its filter, it's using the ACL dual state variable filter. Then we have the Manus, which is taking the exact same pitch and gate as the Osiris is, and it's going through the ACL core ladder filter. It's the Manus because I'm legally obligated to use the Manus pretty much every time. So those come in at the very first part of the track, and then will reintroduce themselves later. Okay, yeah, then we've got kind of the second big lead part, which you've already heard a little bit of. Let me get things set up. So this is used quite a bit through the track in various ways. It also, at a certain point, will jump up octaves. And again, I'm using the Symphonian for that. And that is being created by the chainsaw from Acid Rain, and which 21 saw oscillators to give you that the big super saw. That is running into the Gemini, which is two bandpass filters that are kind of pulsing back and forth. And one of the things that actually really made this work was the I believe this is the Ruina Versio, but I actually have Lacrimator, whichever one sounds like that. I think it's Lacrima, the Lacrima firmware on it, which is essentially like an auto-wah. And if you listen, so let's I believe it's the fourth effect here. So here it is with the auto-wah turned completely off. And here it adds that like initial attack, that I think really makes that voice work.
Oh, Valkyrie, your life force.
Let's get this. Okay, so that was that lead sound. Then we also have another bass line that comes in, and this was actually the sort of original idea that I had for the song. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think it fits terribly well within the song, but I just really liked it a lot. And it's using this very aggressive kick drum. Let's actually. Okay, let's turn you off. So it's using these very aggressive kick drums and this just super gnarly bass sound. So that bass sound is being created from two AGH oscillators. One is one's a square wave and one's a sawtooth, I believe. They're going into the transistor ladder, which is having its resonance CV'd to give it these like resonance spikes to it. And then it is also going, I think it's off camera, but it's going through the Cosmetronics Paradigm, which again is a new recent acquisition. It's a lot like the Dark Matter. I'm not exactly sure what it's doing different than what I could get the Dark Matter to do. Not 100% sure I'm going to hold on to it, but it does sound really nice. And then that is going out into the QMMF, which I believe it's just getting some colorization from that, and then going right through the VCA and then into the mixer. And I think it turned out really good. It's just this super gnarly heavy sound. So let's see. Okay, that's the second bass. I think we went through a couple other just small Small little other voices. Let's take some of this out so we can hear. This is coming out of Fracture. Used it a couple times toward the end. Nothing real fancy, just some modulation going into the Fracture to make it slightly, hopefully less monotonous. And I believe that's all the voices. So let's start from the top. Give me a moment to get everything set the way that it should be. This. Okay. I hear one thing playing that shouldn't. It's because I gotta change the part of the ER101. Okay, so this is the start position of the song. Bring this sound in a little bit. Bring a little voice, do kind of a little bit of introduction here, and then we fade in the very first lead voice. Now we bring in the bass line. And again, we have that bass line high passed, so that later we can drop it in with a little more of a dramatic effect. Now we bring in the Manus. Okay, so next we're going to bring in the kick, and again, if you remember, this is where I said I cheated slightly because I wanted to bring in a high-passed version of the kick, but after the drop I just didn't have a third hand in order to put its filter back down. So we actually bring in a sampled version of that kick. You'll then see me reach over and I actually turn this kick on. I think I turned this one on. I don't even think there is a... I don't think there's actually a sample there, but I know I turned both of those on. I turn the... because now we're running off of the live sample version of that track with this different kick. I actually turn the filter down on the bass line so it's all ready for the drop. And what else do I do to prepare for the drop? I believe that's it. Now I send a MIDI command to the mixer to get it ready for the drop, which is that one there. And all that really does is turn on one of the voices that actually we didn't go over yet, but I'll go over it when we get to it. You can hear it. It's this. It's a voice that actually has a lead line later, but I can use it in this stage just to amp its pitch to create a little bit more of a swell. So now I bring the noise in. I increase things even a little further. I drop everything out. I trigger the voice sample, our gauntlet sample.
Valkyrie, your life force is running out.
And then I drop into the next part of the song. So another cool thing I can do with this elevator sound effect that's going on right now is I can actually add an additional 5 volts to all of those slowly slewing volt per octave pitches. And what that ends up doing is it just makes it swell up. And so I use that a few times where I let it swell up, then I take that 5 volts away and let it kind of slowly cascade down again back into its original sequence that it was going through. So we sit here for a little bit. I reset my little noise pots. I unmute my noise so I can use it again. And now we're going to bring in the Fumana'd version of the voice sample. We do that by switching it so that the Morphogene is just going to continually output the sample. It's going to basically hold the play high. And you should be able to hear that happening in the background. I make it do some rhythms. And we're off and running. So we sit in this for a little bit. And now we're going to bring in the voice that I mentioned that we forgot to cover. And that voice is this one. So again, this was that voice we were able to adjust its pitch. If I switch this sequential switch, I get it to where it's now getting a gate and CV from the Metropolix up here. Quick aside, I recently pulled out the Stilson hammer to put in the Metropolix. I don't know, it's pretty good. Like it's kind of as good as everybody says. And can't believe it, but I might actually sell my Stilson hammer. So anyway, so that's this going on in the background. Hear it a little better if I move to that. So it's at this part of the song that we're bringing that in. And I'm going to slowly take some things away. I'm going to bump up my sequential switch, change my my part on my EO101 so that I can bring in this other main lead. It's high pass filtered through the Linnaeus right now. Okay, now from here, I want to start to move to the different drum kit. I want to bring in that more aggressive drum kit. And I do that. We make sure we're on this new drum kit. Now we're introducing this new, more heavier drum. We go through that for a little bit. I take kind of things in and out, and then ultimately we sort of work our way down to I'm not exactly sure why this is so quiet. This Fumana version wasn't as quiet in the live version, but we work our way down to this. We sort of sit here for a little while, and then ultimately what we want to jump into is our big heavy bass and new kick. And once we've got that going, it's at this point that honestly I cannot tell you exactly what all the steps I did from here. I basically am bringing out things in and out, alternating through bringing in this sound to and I'm going through different permutations of all of this, ultimately to get to sort of the outro of the song, which is getting the track into this state here. out Manus. Oh, at some point I brought this in too. Again, from this point on, it was a little bit of a stream of consciousness of all the different changes that I was making. I haven't had the hats in this whole time, but you obviously can hear those, or the snare, but you can obviously hear that in live performance. So we start to work things out at this point. We take out the hats. We take out the kick. We take out that clang fracture sound. Take the Manus all the way out. Get rid of the bass line. And that's essentially it. There was a couple of different spots that I didn't quite introduce correctly, where we actually jump octaves. Again, just using the Symphonion. Anyway, you get the idea. Well, hope you enjoyed this. Sorry it's a little disjointed and clunky. This is definitely one of those songs where you get to a certain point and all your kind of plans go out the window and you just start bringing things in and out and hopefully make it sound somewhat decent. So a lot of ideas crammed into one track. I'm kind of excited to unpatch everything because I'm going to be making a bunch of changes to the rack. If you guys are interested in some of the changes that I'm going to be making or a walkthrough of my setup in more detail, I'd be happy to do that. We didn't cover really anything up here in this rack up here, which is a whole Serge system, which has been really fun. That's probably one of the more newest things. I actually am using this Serge setup is what is creating this sound, which is a pretty fascinating patch. It's actually running through a bunch of different wave folders, but it's using pretty much all Serge stuff with the exception of the Lo-Fi Junkie, which you can actually hear if I crank it a little bit. But yeah, I got a lot of fun changes to the rack coming. I'm taking out the Trident, putting in a further generator. I'm actually taking out the Metron, putting in a West Licht Performer, taking out the Usta. Things that I never thought I would actually take out, I'm taking out and replacing with things that I actually think are going to be a little more powerful and give me a little more flexibility as I learn how to do this live composition stuff a little more. So anyway, enough droning on. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.